12.58, that's higher than 6.7, isn't it? Almost twice as much. Okay? Now, what I would like for you to do is just start thinking about this just for a second. While there's a little bit of variation here with our cash flow, not a huge amount, but still, you know, it's going to be probably in that 6%-ish range, yes, from year to year. So how is it that we're ending up with a 12.58% return overall? That's being driven by this, by our reversion value. Okay? Now, one of the things that we are going to be doing as a future exercise, if you will, in this course, is to be doing what we call partitioning the IRR. Or what does partitioning mean? Separating. In other words, separating the IRR for the operating income relative to the income derived from the capital gain. Because think about it like this. If you're an investor and you have a choice, you don't always have a choice, but to a certain extent you do have a choice, whether you really want to fundamentally think about it or not, you do. Would you prefer your income off of a property? Now, this is as a developer, as an investor, whoever, would you prefer to have your income generated off of operating income or off of capital gains?
Operating income.
You should say, for the most part, operating income. Why? It's quicker, for one thing. It's bird in the hand, the whole thing of getting the money now. Now, that having been said, to a certain extent, that flies in the face of long-term value, sustainability, really trying to maximize the underlying value of the asset, okay? Because what you're saying is all of you want to be slumlords. No, I mean, to a certain extent. What you're really saying is you want to maximize your short-term revenue. How do you maximize your short-term revenue? You defer your maintenance. You spend as little as possible on the property to maintain it, to manage it, to, any of that. I mean, this is the extreme position, okay? And you milk that property for every single dollar you can get out of it short term. That is going to maximize, without question, the short-term revenue stream that you get from that property. Does that make sense, yes or no? Now, the problem with doing that is that we're deferring maintenance, we're not being responsive as a property manager. We're probably going to, number one, we're going to start losing tenants. Number two, we're going to start having more maybe substantive problems, with deferring the maintenance of things just not working and ultimately the property beginning to fall apart into disrepair and being more problematic. So it's a balancing act is what I guess fundamentally I'm trying to say. But what happens, and this is a very practical, real problem. Emmanuel goes out and he buys this big office building that he wants to occupy. All right, and he puts himself in this office building, and he starts, leasing out to tenants. And maybe, he's not so successful at getting all the tenants that he wants, in that property. All of a sudden, man starts having some cash flow problems, okay, with that property. And what's he going to do? He may say, I'm going to have to start slashing some of the expenses that I'm, spending on this property to keep it well maintained. All of a sudden, starts letting the landscaping go outside, so it starts to look, a little disheveled on the outside. Doesn't, maybe, repaint or recarpet whenever, maybe he needs to keep the property, looking, in a reasonable shape. And so what ends up happening is, he's effectively stealing, if you will, from the operating expenses to try to make sure he's able to cover his debt service and potentially to pay himself back some sort of revenue from owning the property. Yes? Okay? It's a normal thing that happens. Okay? Now, Claudius, on the other hand, he may, take the opposite approach. Claudius is saying, okay, well, you know, I am going to be that landlord, that I am going to be the most meticulous person imaginable, you know, with maintaining this property in every possible conceivable way. I am going to go over the top in making sure that it is absolutely pristine at all times and there are no issues, no problems whatsoever with the management and with the appearance of this property. And as a result, you're going to have, let's say, your tenants being, happy with the way it looks and the way that it feels, and hopefully, but that's going to translate into maybe a longer-term, higher overall value. Whereas what could happen with Emmanuel's case is that this number could get slashed because effectively too much emphasis was placed on starving the property while it was actually in operation. But the problem Claudius is going to run into is potentially, Claudius is going to run into the problem, he is spending so much on maintaining this property that these operating cash flows are next to nothing, okay? Because he's banking that maybe, he's saying to himself, I'm going to hold this thing for 5 years, and at the end of 5 years, I am going to sell it, and I want it to be in the best possible physical, mechanical, operational shape that it can be in so that I can maximize this number. Those are two totally different but legitimate approaches, okay? You follow? Those are extremes. But ideally you kind of probably want something more in the middle, okay? And that would be obviously our good friend Quincy, okay? So Quincy takes more of the balanced approach, in this whole thing. And hopefully is able to still generate the operating income, but yet still have a pretty decent reversion value. But my point with this, in trying to use this as an example, and I'm getting to your question here in a second, is that fundamentally you as a property owner really do have to kind of think about what is your operating strategy with these properties and what you're going to be able to actually do and what is your goal, in terms of owning and managing this property. And because that is going to dictate to a certain extent what kind of rate of return that you're going to be able to achieve. You may be able, you may get super, super lucky. And here's the thing, the one piece of information maybe I left off of Emmanuel's situation is Emmanuel knows something that Claudius and Quincy don't. Emmanuel knows that 5 years from now, the government is going to come in through eminent domain and buy this property and pay an absolute fortune for this property. So all that maintenance that Claudius put in is basically for nothing. Do you follow? Okay. All right. Did you? I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah. So under those examples you just gave the scenarios, the NOI and the cash flows are really just a benchmark for an investor, right? Because when they come in there, they still underwrite to their expenses.
Exactly, they should. I mean, they should make their own projections. They're going to look at what has been the historic, operating conditions for the property, and they're going to, begin to say, well, relative to other similar properties, you've been spending a lot on maintenance and repair and, that sort of thing relative to everybody else. We think we can do better and be more efficient, not quite be Emmanuel, but we think we can be more efficient, more like Quincy, and come in and create some value there. Because we think Claudius has been overspending on these items. But consequently, you could have the opposite perspective, that you could say you're buying it from Emmanuel, and you're saying, oh my God, we're going to have to spend a small fortune to get this property, up to a level of operating compliance and to reverse some of the damage that maybe has been done on the operational side.
So it's definitely a balancing act. What I've noticed is, as a developer, owner, maintaining these properties makes it more attractive to the potential investor.
Absolutely.
And then obviously, the more money you spend on operational costs, the less you're capturing on the cash flows. But at the same time, when an investor does come to underwrite, they're underwriting to their expenses. So if they come in lower, then obviously your reversion value is a lot higher. So that's something I've noticed.
No, it's absolutely the case. But it's just, But I think it's an important lesson for you to just kind of get embedded into your brain of just, realizing, okay, here are kind of two polar extremes. Realizing, yeah, that normalcy is going to be somewhere, there within the middle, but, there are those people that operate at those two extremes. I have personally seen them, and, they do exist. It's just a question of what is the resulting impact of all of that.
The other question is, if we go through the approach where we overspend on maintenance to make it all pristine and look nice, right, our net operating income is going to be reduced. So when we find our reversion value and we try to sell it, we're going to have a lower sell price even though the property is better maintained, right?
Not necessarily, because what we may find is that, once again, we're going to be rewarded for possibly having physically maintained the property. It all kind of comes down to, whenever they are applying the different approaches to value, if they start looking at sort of a sales comparison approach versus an income approach versus sort of a cost approach, and reconciling those values, it may very well be that the really well-maintained property, number one, is going to score really high on the cost approach because there's very little depreciated value physically, okay? It may score very high on the sales comparison approach because, looking at comparable properties, it's better maintained than the comparable properties. The part where there may be a little bit of a problem with that is with regard to the income approach of just strictly looking at the income. That Claudius's income might be a little bit lower, which would translate into a lower, value based upon the income. But what they might say, and this is where it gets interesting and tricky, is they might apply a lower cap rate to the property that is managed by Claudius, whereas they would apply a much higher cap rate to the income of the property managed and owned by Emmanuel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, because they're sort of seeing Claudius's income as being more stable, more secure, more reliable, more, fundamental, whereas you're seeing Emmanuel's is potentially being more erratic or potentially, artificially, enhanced or deflated as a result of all those, repairs and maintenance items that aren't being addressed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what would be your recommended guidelines for formulating a strategic plan to maximize benefits given all of these different scenarios?
That's an excellent question, Claudius, because what you would do as a practical matter is you would model all of this. And you would model in kind of the extreme scenarios. And you would sort of say, to what extent, can we maybe get higher rents if we better maintain it? To what extent, and this is precisely, these are precisely the kind of questions that a prospective purchaser or investor, developer, whoever is going to be asking. And, and sort of saying, under which kind of scenario are we going to maximize our value? And it's not going to be absolute that one size fits all. It's just not. It's going to be, a combination of that market, that information, that property, those tenants, lender, everybody, involved in that is going to potentially influence that in some way. I mean, the genius part of Emmanuel's situation is the fact that he has that information about this property, that's going to be sold, under eminent domain 5 years from now. So he is working with information that no one else is working with. So therefore, he's definitely taking the right approach for his information. You don't have that information. Therefore, your approach is, I'm just going to keep managing this property in the best possible way I can. Make sense?
Yes. My final question is, where does gross rent multiplier factor into this?
All right, good question. Okay, so let's move to that. Well, actually, before we do that, we do one thing, then we'll move to that. All right, so another step that we could potentially take here is we would say, all right, we've got a business partner. And let's say in this particular case, your business partner is me. all right? So I'm stuck with all three of you on 3 different properties with 3 different sort of operating approaches. But I don't really care how each of you manages your properties, okay? What I care about is one single thing, and that is what is going to be my return, okay, to me as an investor, all right? And so in my particular case, I simply want a fixed 10% rate of return each and every year based on whatever income the property is throwing off. Does that make sense? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, let's apply that 10% rate of return to this series of cash flows. So it's a 10% interest rate, and then solve for net present value. All right, now the number that we get there, okay, is $32,489.09. But let's just say we're going to stick with the $32,489, all right, is going to be our net present value. Now, in this particular scenario that I have described, I am your business partner, all right? I only want that fixed 10% rate of return. Therefore, you're going to pay me my fixed 10% rate of return. How much do you, each of you, get to keep after everything is said and done? $32,489. Does that make sense, yes or no? In other words, you have paid me my money, my fixed 10%, you're going to need to keep the residual. That is the net present value. In other words, this is the hurdle rate that you've got to get over, okay? And then whatever is left over is what you would get to keep above and beyond that hurdle rate. The overall project is yielding 12.58%, okay? So to say that you've got to pay me 10% out of that 12.58%, the remainder is a dollar amount of $32,049. Yes, ma'am.
But that's not. Didn't you say in the beginning where you wanted to calculate 10% each year? This is
10%. Yes. No. It is 10% overall. I'm sorry.
Oh, right.
10% overall for the project.
Right.
Okay. And so I'm going to get paid my 10% though each year.
Right.
And then also with reversion, I'm going to get 10%. Okay. Now, where you're really going to probably clean up is you're going to get more money on the reversion.
Right.
Yep. That's it.
How do we find that value for 10% we pay?
That's net present value.
Well, really, if you think about it, to a certain extent, it's really the same. You're getting roughly $30,000 a year. That's the 10%. I am being paid roughly $30,000 a year. So in one sense, you're going to be running a deficit for each of these years, paying me that flat 10% off of that $300,000, where the real money is going to come from is on that reversion of the $400,000.
So that comes from
Right.
the purchase price
Right.
or the value.
Right.
So if you wanted to get an exact dollar value for that 10%, would it be adding up all the cash flows?
Yeah, in essence, you would just go through and you would take the $300,000 and say, okay, what is 10% of that each year?
Would you
Well,
do,
10% of the 20, and the 25 and 22, right?
Would you do basic time value money
Yes.
and 10% interest rate, your present value, and then you figure out your payments?
now you're-
Yeah, I mean, okay. There are other ways that we can do this, and we don't have time to get into them right now. We will get into them, okay? Right now, just simply be comfortable with this, okay? Now, the other piece that Claudius asked for is specifically as it relates to a gross rent multiplier, okay? Now, the gross rent multiplier is what? What is the formula for gross rent multiplier? You're basically taking your potential rental income and doing what?
Yearly?
Multiply it by your forecast.
No?
No, you're dividing it by the property value.
Yes, the purchase price. So in other words, you're taking the actual purchase price divided by the potential rental income, okay? So in this particular scenario, we'll just say we've got the purchase price of $300,000 and the potential rental income, in this case for year one, was what was it, 20,000
Yeah.
for year one? Okay. So what you're going to get is a gross rent multiplier of 15. Now, what does that number mean? Number is simply a relative reflection of what is the value of the property relative to the gross income that the property generates. So in this case, this is going to be the kind of thing where you're going to have multiple properties that maybe you're looking at within a marketplace, and you're going to be saying, all right, here's what all those properties sold for, here's what their potential rental incomes are going to be for those properties, here are their respective gross rent multipliers. And so what you would then be able to do is, from getting several different comparables, that if all of your comparables happen to be coming up, that in other words, your comparables are at a 10 gross rent multiplier, what is that saying about your property? Well, what it's saying is all of the others are selling at 10 times their income. Yours is supposedly, you've got it on the market, or it's actually generating 15 times its income. That says, is there something special about your property? Is there something that maybe you have overpriced your property, possibly, perhaps? You know, what is it that's potentially driving that? And so you've got to sort of take a look at, maybe, you know, are you being realistic with what the value is of your property? However, if the comparables are at a 20, then you're asking the opposite question. You're saying, what have I missed? You know, why is my value to income so dramatically less than what the market is actually showing? Therefore, I may not be charging enough in income to substantiate. Okay, make sense? Okay.
So that 20 grand, you use that from the previous example?
I just kind of pulled. It don't.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be connected.
But it is gross though, not in line.
In this case, yes. It should be gross. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Okay. So shift, display, none. Okay. All right. Any other questions before we give you the quiz? All right. Let's see. I think we've got. Yep. I think we're all good. Okay. Here we go. You've got until 10:15. This one's a lot easier than the one you took last week. Yeah. Once again, the quiz is open book, open notes, open computer, but not open make. Doctor?
Is there an answer sheet?
I will give you the answer sheet.
at this level, you guys, everybody should get 100 on this.
I'm already.
push.
What is it? When you finish, bring it on up with both your answer sheet as well as the question sheet, and I will grade them and give them back to you. Or not give them back, I'll give it to Barry. By my calculations, you've got about 4 minutes. Okay, it's 10:15. Yep.
Should I put it on there now?
Yep. Question sheet.
Can we see it?
Yep.
Want to grade the rest?
I didn't get an answer.
Oh.
You just gave me this.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That'll mean, yeah, that'll be fine.
One of the investment bankers, they said no. Not interested at
See,
all.
Aaron, you can't sit with us. Here. Brandon, you just check your seat.
Okay, final last call for the quizzes.
I thought he was in there too, but he didn't.
Okay, that's it. I don't have your quiz in the next 5 seconds. It's a 0.
Fail.
Any way we can get the tech before the test?
Claudius.
Dr. Forgy.
He doesn't even know why. Well, he might
I'm on
know
from
why.
10:15 until.
Until 3:45.
Okay, guys, we're starting because otherwise we're not going to leave here today. So please take your seats. We're late already.
Let's go.
We're late already, so simmer down. Phones away.
Phones off.
That would be even better. If you left it at home, it would be even better.
What if
Because
I
it's
die on
bigger.
the way here?
It's bigger than you.
My phone is
The phone owns you.
Is that?
Okay, very quickly, we'll take attendance. Reina, that's you. Okay, got it, okay. Claudius, I saw you somewhere. Yeah, I'm here. There we go.
Hey, good morning, how are you?
Okay, Monica Cruz,
Yes.
that's you?
Yes.
Diane, I saw you. Frederick, I saw you. Stephen, I saw you. She's not here. Victor? Jason? Noah? You know, we're creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit. We sit in the same chair all the time.
This has been my school all year.
Laura? Tracy? Tracy going once? Twice? Bridget? Kathleen? Chelsea? Brandon? Emmanuel, I saw you. Marianela? Natasha? Natasha Robinson? Quincy Smith, I saw you over there. Rebecca?
I'm here.
Kyle?
You have the
Janae?
handouts that have every single policy.
Ben? Chantel? Chantel White? Chantel White going once? Twice? Erica Williams? Okay, welcome. This is 5890, real estate accounting. Is there anybody here whose name I did not call? Nobody whose name I did not call. Excellent. Welcome. This is real estate accounting, REE 5890. This is what we're going to do today, hopefully, okay? We're going to go through an introduction of the class. We've got some, guys, computers off, eyes up here, okay? There will be a time today in which we will pull out our computers and we will do some things. But till then, I need eyes. Are we filming, Doc? Okay, perfect. All right. So we're going to